Welcome. Well, you're at home with Jim and Joy, and you are an important part of our EWTN family. And we're delighted that you have welcomed us into your home. Well, we want to hear from you. So send us an email, any question or comment to jimandjoy@ewtn.com. Well, today we're going to revisit a great show that we did where we featured John and Christine Foppe. Now, John was born without arms, but that has not slowed him down one bit. He explains how his faith helped him to overcome his disability and how he uses this story to inspire others. And you will be blessed to watch and hear. It's a magnificent story of courage and faith and hope. And we were so blessed to have John and Christine on the show.
You know, John's very frank that he wasn't always at the place where he is now. And it was a lot to overcome in his life. And that he says he led a miserable, limited life. Miserable. And through various challenges in his life, and if I recall correctly, I think it was his mom or dad, they would do everything for him without the arms. And then one day they just said, you know, you're gonna have to learn how to dress yourself and whatever. He was so mad, so angry, started taking some steps. And he just went on in his life and finally came into that place where he says basically, I was armed with faith. He who has no arms was saying, now God has armed me with faith. And so I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And he's become this incredible force for good, his own nonprofit business that he has, motivating people, sharing his story. And so many business people want him to come and speak because he's such a visionary and a vision caster, and how you get from one place to another place and how you do that and how you overcome. So it's a tremendous, tremendous story. Christine is an absolute delight. He's married with a beautiful child. He's armed with faith, are we?
Well, and the beautiful thing that he does, he's an inspirational speaker, and he goes to schools, especially for children, you know, in their adolescence who are really struggling. And John really struggled. He was very honest about that, just about your identity and who you really are. And we are all so much more than our outward appearance.
I want to throw something in real quick before we go right to the spot. When John and Christine came, what did we serve them for lunch? Not us, but people here who cook. They didn't know who he was. Spaghetti. No arms. And he took his foot and held the fork and fed himself spaghetti.
He did.
You know, that was when I knew, well, this is an unusual person. And just his courage. And he says, you know, all of us have various conditions. These are mine. But armed with faith, you could do anything. So we pray that you take that with you as you watch this powerful witness by John and Christine Foppe.
Welcome to At Home with Jim and Joy.
It's good to be with you.
Well, I didn't read your book in its entirety, but I went through parts of it and was very taken. You did a great job telling your story. You made me fall in love more with your mother. Yeah. So praise.
Father's a pretty nice guy too.
Yeah, but you know, it was a beautiful story. Well, John and Christine, we want you to tell our family at home a little bit about your story, where you're born and raised, the family you came from. So go on.
Well, obviously, you see my empty sleeves, and I was born without arms. I was actually born with 7 major birth defects, most of which over time kind of corrected themselves, but I was born without arms. We're from a small town in southern Illinois called Breeze, about 40 miles east of St. Louis. I am one of 8 sons. I'm number 4.
One of 8 sons.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
My mom and dad were 27 and 28 years old when they had me. I was supposed to be their little girl. And obviously I didn't come into the world a healthy little girl, but instead a sickly, disabled baby boy. And their lives were turned upside down. I mean, learning naturally a lot of heated emotions, pity, anger, but most of all fear. And then questions, you know, why did this have to happen to us? And how's he going to eat? How's he going to get dressed? How's he going to fend for his day-to-day needs? But my family, my parents are very courageous people. They're people of faith, and they helped pull together to help me adapt to my adversity. I grew up in that small town, was fortunate enough to be mainstreamed into a Catholic school, in a Catholic grade school and high school, and went to St. Louis University for college. When I got out of school, I started my career as a motivational speaker for the legendary Zig Ziglar. Wrote the book, What's Your Excuse? It's been translated into 6 foreign languages. I wrote that to really to help my story turn it into lessons on making the most of what you have, for people to get encouragement and support for whatever it is that they're dealing with. You know, so often I'm asked in life, in our politically correct culture, there's still awkwardness around disabilities. I mean, we've come a long way as a society, but people still want to know what's the correct term. Is it a disability? Are you physically challenged? Is it special needs? I call it a condition, in that everyone has a condition.
Right.
So I spent much of my career as a motivational speaker, helping people with their conditions. 14 years ago, I met this wonderful woman, Christine. We actually met at a speaking engagement, and we're head over heels, love at first sight. We are engaged within 7 weeks.
Which is quite the opposite of your 6 years.
Yeah, but I was very young. I was 14 years old.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
And we've had a wonderful 13 years of marriage. Part of our story also is we had trouble conceiving a child. I do a lot of volunteer work with the Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa's nuns, and they heard about our situation, and they told me how Mother often prayed with infertile couples, and she would send them away and say, now 1 year from today, bring me a baby.
Wow.
And we never met Mother Teresa. She died in '97, but the sister said, we're going to pray for you for that, and a month and a half later, Christine conceived our little girl.
Praise the Lord.
Faith
Yeah.
Teresa, and she is 9 years old. She's the
absolutely
love and
beautiful.
joy of our life.
Our miracle.
Yeah, and today, I still do some speaking, but I am executive director of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul for the Archdiocese of St. Louis.
Fantastic.
We have about 3,000 Vincentian volunteers working in neighborhoods all throughout the 13 eastern counties of Missouri, providing person-to-person help to people in
They
need.
do a great work.
They
It's
do.
great work. We've had some of the leaders on from St. Vincent de Paul, and just so impressive here in the country and throughout the world. Now, Christine, your encounter with John, was it at an event that he was leading? Did you hear about him beforehand, or how did you begin to really connect with him, and how did you work through saying yes to his proposal? Or did you propose to him? I don't know how that worked exactly, but
It's kind of a funny story. A friend of mine, Emma, she had become a friend of mine recently, and we decided to become roommates. And she was dating a guy that she got engaged to, and I asked her she mentioned his last name was Foppy. And I said, is he related to John Foppy? And she goes, yeah. And I said, oh, I always wanted to hear him speak. I've always wanted to meet him. And she said, well, I'll let you know if something comes up. So something came up. It was a political event, and I was like, oh, I don't think I want to go to that. But I didn't have anything better to do, so I went.
And I don't normally ever give those kind of talks,
Right,
but I did it as
right.
a favor to my dad.
So all these boring politicians were up, and I was like, why am I here? And then John gets up, and he is so funny. And everybody is just, the whole mood
He's
is
funny?
lightened. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he was so funny. And we went out after that, and we've been together ever since.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like political jokes,
Yeah.
unless they get elected.
I got you.
I spent, as I said, much of my career as a motivational speaker and wrote a book. Over the years, I've spoken to a lot of different audiences from all walks of life, but a lot of that is businesses and in the secular world. This was purely a nonprofit venture for us to be able to really tell my story from the faith perspective more. I mean, of course, I've always spoke about hope and encouragement and perseverance and all that, but what's underneath all of that is faith, right? At the end of the day, that's all we really have. I mean, I'm now 46 years old, and I see through the passage of time, everything passes, right? Everything is fleeting, and things change. But faith is all we really ever have. So I wanted to have an opportunity to tell that. People often asked about, my faith life, and I would share it and ask, but this is an opportunity to really just focus particularly on the aspects of suffering, of redemptive suffering. It's something that I don't think we in the Catholic world, first of all, I don't think we necessarily have enough examples, vibrant examples of people living their faith. But also, I don't know that we all talk about the Paschal mystery of Jesus Christ enough. Disabilities or illnesses or trauma, whatever it is, it's uncomfortable, right? And we like to console people, but we also want to move on. But I think we do ourselves an injustice when we do that we don't talk enough about where Christ is at in the midst of that. A priest who helped my mom and dad when I was born, his name was Father John Moronic, he always pointed out to them that we are Easter people. Christians are Easter people, but we don't get to that Easter without really living through and walking through that Good Friday. I truly believe it's through our inconveniences, or what we think are inconveniences, or our hindrances, our encumbrances, all those things. That's where God's calling us. He's using those things to call us to serve Him and to bring glory to the world and hope and encouragement. So much of our secular society today is about me, my life, my agenda, my plans, and I really like, particularly when I'm talking to students in this younger generation, because they're just bombarded with it. You hear so much of this idea of my passion. It was my passion to do this and that, and that's fine to an extent. But the problem is it's awfully self-serving, and as I said, it's fleeting. I really believe, though, that God, yes, He might be working through your passion, but He's really calling us to a deeper mission, His mission, a mission to go out and touch souls and to help bring people to Christ. And He does that through conditions. You look at salvation history, it's exciting. I mean, all throughout the Bible, God used people's conditions. I mean, Noah was a drunk.
Right.
Moses stuttered.
Yeah.
Martha was a worrywart. Rahab was a prostitute. Paul had to get knocked from his horse. A lot of times we don't want to be molded, but when we let God do that, just beautiful things happen.
And I think as a society, what we don't get from God's perspective is that God is attracted to all of our weaknesses, because there are opportunities to turn them into something beautiful for Him.
That's right.
And reading in your book and hearing your mother's story and, just what she went through, and your dad as, when you were born, and how do we respond to you, and how do we tell the neighbors, how do we call the family? This was the day before ultrasounds.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, what would they have done had they known? But here they were presented with you, a gift from God, a treasure to behold and to love, and to bless your life, that you then would be a gift, not just to them, but to the whole world. Now, only God could have thought of something like that.
Yeah, you never know. You never know where you're going to be when, I always say in the beginning of my book, I say you never know by the time night falls where you're going to be, what God has put in front of your life. But, that's our call and our challenge. And the Blessed Mother gives us a great example of that continual yes, just to go with it.
Well, a lot of years in your life. You're how old now?
46.
And this has been your condition since probably in your mother's womb and your birth. And so were you always this positive, always this strong, always this having it together? Or were you just kind of born that way too? Is he always like that? And just, kind of, is this what it's like? Do you want to, but I mean, your younger years and all, and your own self-image and what's going on in school, and was there a conversion in your own life in terms of seeing differently, or what?
Oh, of course. I mean, growing up, at first it was very hard. I mean, particularly when going to school and seeing kids, run out onto the playground and, put the bat and ball, and, I couldn't do that. So certainly I had those early years of low self-esteem and no motivation, and of course the pity party. So, why me? Why did this have to happen to me? And then that spilling over into frustration over, kind of focusing on what I couldn't do, focusing on never be able to ride a bike or hold a girlfriend's hand and things like that. And it really led to it really led to that downward spiral of despair, where the fear of failure, of rejection, embarrassment, that led to anger, and then that anger led to bitterness. I got the chip on my shoulder. I thought the world owed me everything because of the way that I was created, and then not being thankful for a loving family or a school system that mainstreamed me, and then of course the self-pity. So I led the early part of my life really a life marked by dependency. I just let everybody do things for me. Whatever I didn't want to do or whatever I thought was too hard, I had the perfect excuse, right? And I used it. And it really was, up until 11 years old, 10, almost 11, I couldn't even put my own pants on. And it was really a time of tough love. My parents recognizing that I was growing up and I wanted to go off to a summer camp and I wasn't ready. And they just, told me no, until you start taking some responsibility and try to figure this thing out for yourself. That was the first turning point. There have been many since, but that was the first one of recognizing that there was really only one person standing in my way, and his name was John.
And what about your brothers? That your mom, there's a story in the book about your brothers and bringing you home to the family, and how your brothers just were going to take care of you and love you and be with you. How important is your brother's influence and love in your life?
My brothers are extremely important in my life. Family in general. Early on, my brothers were very welcoming and accepting. And there's a story in the book about they wanted to give me what was in their piggy bank, which, by the way, I never got.
Right. But they meant it. If they had it, they would have given it.
Very supportive. Even to this day, when something breaks around the house or furnace quits or something, I can always call Uncle Bill or somebody to give a hand. And but more than that, it's the emotional and the moral support, just always encouraging. People always ask, kids particularly ask, was I picked on at school? And I don't have a lot of memories of those kind of painful memories of being ridiculed. And you could attribute that to a small town, you could attribute that to a Catholic school, but I really think it was more to the fact that I had 7 brothers.
And there was probably a Foppy in every grade who was going to take up for you, right?
Yeah.
I've seen brothers do that.
Yeah.
Share something about John. Just what is it like to live with this guy? Notice this is live TV, so you can't take back what you said. No, what is it like for you, this relationship?
Yes.
Well, he's a driver.
Yeah.
So he really knows how to get things done.
I bet he does.
But what comes to mind is, I wasn't always Catholic. I became Catholic about
14 years ago.
14 years ago.
Oh, 13, right before we were married.
Yeah, right before we were married. And I was kind of negative on dating and marriage and that kind of thing. And I knew I was Christian, but I didn't know where I fit.
Yeah.
And then I met John, and I saw a very faith-filled man and his family, 7 brothers that were all successful, most entrepreneurs. And then I met his parents, who at that time when they were having their 40th anniversary, and they still held hands, they still gave each other a kiss. They were happy. Yeah. And I thought, there must be something to this Catholic thing, because this is unreal to me, So John's brother, Patrick, was my sponsor, and I went to RCIA, and I took my time, and I was moved, touched, and inspired, and decided to become Catholic. And so I was baptized, confirmed, and married, and met the Pope all in 1 month.
That's a lot. That's like Catholic 101 rush job. How wonderful.
And being with John, it's been crazy ever since.
Yeah. You met the Pope. What was that like?
2, actually. He's met 3. So.
When I was 6 years old, my father and I went on a pilgrimage with other handicapped people with a group called the Victorious Missionaries out of the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows in Belleville. And part 1 stop was Lourdes, and I have a birth defect in my hips that we've always been concerned about. So the idea was to go on this pilgrimage to Lourdes and then on to Rome. And in Rome, because we were with all these disabled people, in wheelchairs. They were up front in the Paul VI auditorium. When I was 6 years old, the Pope was up there giving this long homily, and I was bored and didn't understand what he was saying anyway. So Dad gave me a rosary, and I started fiddling with it. I was tying it in knots, and the Holy Father saw this, and he said to the Swiss guard, "Bring me the bambino without arms who can do so much with his feet. I want to give him a blessing." Yeah. So then they escorted Dad and I up onto the altar to be blessed by him. And that was a beautiful once-in-a-lifetime experience. But then when we were on our honeymoon, our last stop was in Rome, and we happened to make it to a general audience where Saint John Paul II was doing blessings of married people who were married recently. And we got to meet him.
Yeah, with that, there was a little bit of drama before that.
Yeah, well, we lost the passports and all that, but that's a whole other
and
story.
we weren't told we were supposed to wear our wedding attire.
Oh, yeah, so you showed up without your wedding attire.
Oh, we were on a 3-week honeymoon, so we got that email like a week before.
Right,
We
and
were
the
already,
dress wasn't with
yes,
you.
so did
But
some
we
fast
improvised.
shots.
But we improvised, and that was a beautiful moment. He was frail, but still very alert. And he asked if I was an American, and I told him I was from the Diocese of Belleville, and he said, "Oh yes, Bishop Gregory knew who our bishop was." And then we were blessed with meeting Pope Benedict. Back in, I guess, 2008, I guess it was, I mentioned to you that I do a lot of volunteer work with the Missionaries of Charity. And Sister Maria Pia, who is the regional superior in Italy, made a call. And within 3 hours, she had us in a private meeting with Pope Benedict.
Incredible.
See, men just think they run the Catholic Church.
Right.
Right. You were sharing earlier on, that you weren't always this way in terms of your attitude and outlook.
Sure.
And I think you said something. You said it strongly, too. You said, I was in the way or the problem was me. I mean, you said that, boom, How do you deal with conditions? I mean, I have conditions, right? Everybody has conditions. Some are more pronounced than others, maybe. How do you really face your limits? I mean, you have some limits. And yet set out to be all that you can be, and do that in a holistic and a balanced way. Because I think we could say, well, I can do anything. Well, you can't do anything, really.
Not any good at golf.
I can tell you what.
Nor am I.
But we had lunch today, and I opened up the lunch thing for you both, and I opened it up, and it was spaghetti. And I said, "Oh no, it has to be spaghetti today." Because I'm saying, he's like, "How's he going to eat spaghetti?" But right
didn't
away
miss
with the
it.
foot,
Oh,
he says,
no, he loves
it was
spaghetti.
perfect.
do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we help people? How do we see ourselves and not be optimistic to a fault,
Right.
yet not hold back and be all that we can be and be challenged and move on? How do you deal with that?
Well, you mentioned earlier about when I was born and the response of my parents and family. I mean, it really is a family story. My Aunt Marie, who my mom really looked up to, she said, we're just going to accept him as he is. And she was able to, Mom naturally went through all her emotions, the fear, the anger, the guilt, or whatever. And, that's the beautiful thing about family. When we don't necessarily have it in ourselves, they can be a tremendous support to us. Not only to help out, but maybe also to keep us humble and to be encouraging and all that.
Well, John and Christine, this has been wonderful. I wish you lived here. We'd just like to get with you more often. Thank you for the great witness that you both are. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Please don't go away.
Well, I know that you were inspired and blessed by John's story. It is really one of great hope and perseverance. John Foppe, one who is armed with faith. Amen. Well, please join us again next time, where we'll be joined by Katrina Layden and Francis Ross, and they're going to tell us all about the first Saturday devotion and why it is so important today. We're delighted that you have tuned us in and welcomed us into your home. You are always at home with Jim and Joy, and you are an important part of our EWTN family. Bye now.